Okay, so I think we have a good group of people here now, and as I said, we're going to continue to have some folks join us. I'm Jamie Hecker, and I am part of your programming team this year. I work with the community group, but today I am going to lead us through just a little bit of training. Hopefully we can have some conversation later. But we realize that we've, as a programming team, talked and have spent a very long time away from one another, and a lot of people are eager to get back together, and wanted to come up with just some guidelines and have an opportunity to check in on how we might be able to make our events the safest and best and most successful they can be as we move forward. Just a note, please let me know if you're having any trouble hearing me in case you're getting an echo or anything. So we called this planning for uncertainty, and we know that everything is just going to continue to be uncertain as we move forward, but we do the best we can. Jessica, if you could start us off. So I want to start off by saying I express interest in doing this because I do work in public health, but I am not a nurse, I am not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm a communications person for public health, and I always want to reiterate that when you're looking at event planning, whether it's your wedding or a GMM or a fundraiser, that look at the current rules, laws, et cetera, that are in place, the executive orders. Those of us who pay close attention to this realize that these things change literally daily. So it's important to catch up on this. What might have been legit yesterday isn't today, or what might have been, you might be able to have a larger crowd or do some things that weren't able to be done before. Also, depending on the region that you live in, things may be different, and some local counties, county boards or health officers have put in different restrictions. And so always look at those things to make sure whatever you're doing is within the confines of the law, and that we're making sure we're on top of that as it changes all the time. And that goes for things like CDC and State of Michigan Department of Health guidance as well. These things change frequently as new knowledge is gained, as things are updated. And so if you want to plan an event, if you want to be safe, make sure that you take the time to update yourself as frequently as possible. So getting that out of the way, and as my lawyer friend saying, just our basic disclaimer that this is not legal advice, this is not medical advice, but those are just that's just good basic advice. I always check with that. So I feel like a lot of us are doing outdoor events right now. It's summer, the season is right for it, and we're also finding that that's one of the safest ways to hold events, to help people spread out and not stay so close. But it does come with some challenges, and so when we're having people close together, wanting to make sure we have the ability, especially if there's food, for them to have hand washing, hand sanitizer. A lot of this stuff is super basic, but I think it's stuff that's not usually in our PMGs that is going to be in our PMGs going forward. Where can people wash their hands? Are we going to have hand sanitizer? What are those options? I think it's important to continue to communicate that no one who is ill, any kind of illness, should attend. And while we don't need to necessarily have the same kind of the screenings you may have at your workplace, I do think it's important that we have somebody checking or asking people at the beginning when they come in, especially to any kind of event in an enclosed area, if they've been ill or if they've been known to be exposed to COVID-19. I think it's if you're going to have those kind of things, it's a consideration to have. If you have to have it to walk into public buildings, to pay a parking ticket or to go to work, it's something we may want to think about. One of the things that I've seen other organizations, when they've had to make a decision whether or not they've canceled an event, they said, even if we're the safest we possibly, we want to be the safest we possibly can be, because for our own, not just for our liability, but for our good name and for our conscience, we wouldn't want to have us to be responsible for somebody getting sick. So we want to do the best things we can do. So if you'll notice, one of the things that runs through here a lot is having these things be somebody's job. This is also one of the things we talk a lot about in our PMG is whose job is this? And rather than just, oh yeah, somebody's got to be in charge of that, who is the person, and have that person be the one in charge of being the screener. We want to make sure we include in our project planning going forward, washing and sanitizing surfaces before and after events. Again, I want us to start putting in our resources. What is it we need to do to properly wash and sanitize surfaces, especially if they're going to be touched by people, if there's going to be food involved. I throw back to the CDC guidelines because that does that exists there, where we can get the most up-to-date information on what it is that we're that meets that standard. And mask wearing, it's everybody's favorite thing to talk about on social media, is to have people wear masks properly, not necessarily as earrings, anytime they're not eating or drinking. And when we first developed this a week ago, this wasn't the executive order that existed now. See above about these things changing. Don't make this optional. Please make sure that people know that this is an expectation, except for, you know, those rare medical exceptions that exist, or young children. Those are our basic considerations. Jessica, please. Social, or I prefer to call it physical distancing, because we're trying to encourage social activity. But you know, to encourage that physical distancing, people naturally, when we finally get together, we are going to want to hug, we are going to want to talk, we're going to want to be close to each other. So it's up to us as project planners, as leaders, to try to frankly engineer the environment to encourage this. So if you're going to have things where people are going to be lining up or anything, I find that it's really helpful to mark out those distances ahead of time. If you're going to be, if you have cement or floor, tape, if you're going to be outside, chalk paint. We've used nice things like things from different road races. Avoid activities that are going to, you know, kind of include lineups, or you know, the kind of field games that would include people being right next to each other. If you are having an indoor meeting, arrange your chairs before people arrive so that you have them in the proper distance in the way that you want them. And I've also found that it really helps with planning to use arrow signs, cones, corrals, whatever it is we want to encourage like one-way traffic flow. I think I've seen that it doesn't work super well at the grocery store because they put the arrows on the floor and no one can see them. So we can do better. So the signs where people can see them, put cones, etc. So we can engineer the environment a little bit to encourage that. We're not going to go around and be busting. We don't need to go around and bust up clusters of people, but we can encourage and find creative ways to at least address this and educate it without having to run around all the time with like a 6-foot ruler and try to keep people apart. So eliminating high touch items. The first thing that came to my mind is we are JCs and we love sign-in sheets. And I don't think we need to pass around a sign-in sheet and a pen in this time. And I don't know that we need to in general. There's a lot of other ways that we can do that. So we can have one person take attendance. We can have virtual check-ins, photos, or another method. So, and as Jerry said, feel free to ask questions in the chat and we will have some time to talk afterwards. But yeah, so if you do want somebody to take attendance or check people in, have that just be somebody in one person instead of passing around the pen. For food, and we've talked about this at the board level as well as many local chapters have talked about this. When we get together, we still want to do picnics and communal and food, but highly suggested we bring your own picnic style as opposed to a potluck where everyone's using shared utensils or a family style. Or the other option is maybe like a box lunch instead of a catered family style meal. What we're suggesting or what restaurants have really gone to is individual condiments, you know, small packages of ketchup and mustard instead of big pump things of them. You know, instead of doing fountain drinks or jugs of Kool-Aid, do cans and bottles. I say avoid food altogether if possible, but I'm really thinking more for like public events that don't need to have it where you're looking at a real logistical nightmare. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get together and have food. So I'm not the fun police, please. Again, similarly to like your attendance and to having people kind of be a door person doing a little bit of a screening. Anything that's handing out, have one dedicated person doing it instead of a floater of, oh no, who's handing out water, who's handing out forks now, so that we don't have so many different people touching different things. Let's have, Jerry's going to be the water person today, so let's have Jerry do that. So I think that's a good thing. Just one other thing I want to go, just pop back up to that top thing is, I don't want us to abandon sign-ins because it's a good idea for JCs, but also should something happen, you're going to want to know who is at your event, just because it would make it much better for your friendly neighborhood health department to contact you and say who all was at your event. Somebody happened to test positive for COVID. Just like they would want to know if you had a meal and somebody got food poisoning, it would be much easier to help with that. So, okay. Communicating expectations is the most important thing, honestly, is that once we've decided what we want to do and we have reviewed everything, found ourselves to be as legit as possible, is that we need to set out our expectations ahead of time so people don't show up and they're surprised at what we're doing. I think the event invitation, your social media, your email, your reminders, make people know that they are going to be required to wear masks. They are going to be requested to do this. We are going to be doing XYZ. Printed signage is really helpful, and I think it sounds like I'm trying to be overbearing, but I think people really do like to have, like, if you only want one-way traffic and you don't have signs, then you're just going to be spending your whole time really frustrated that people aren't going the way you want them to, and I don't think that's any fun. So printed signs, and a lot of that stuff already exists, but we can sometimes be more fun and clever. And you know, you go to the zoo and they tell you to stand 2 donkey whips apart from people or something. So we can, so yeah, it can be cute, but I think it's also just helpful to communicate your expectations, let people know ahead of time not to come if they're sick, or just any of those things. Let them know if you're going to have food, if they always expect you to have a potluck and you're not going to be providing food anymore. People need to know that, and that gives everyone a chance to have a better time, even though things are different than they used to be. And as with everything in JCs, it comes down to demonstrating and modeling. We need to show it. The project leadership, the chapter and local organization leadership, as well as leadership at our state level, needs to walk the walk. We need to say, these are the things that are important. These are, and we're going to do it. We're not going to whine and complain about wearing masks. We're not going to be in, you know, in a cluster or doing whatever. We're going to, you know, do the things that we need to do to make sure we can still hold in-person events. And that's what I think is really important. We have to reinforce the safe and healthy guidelines and do it whether it's fun or not. And so I think that's the beauty of being a leader, just like and you get to see that hopefully we soon can have more of our in-person events. So let's see, what do we have? Oh, this is a handy dandy guy, kind of infographic that really shows kind of how to reduce your risk. Found a lot of times that if you say yes, do this, no, do that, people really just turn off. But risk is a, you know, it's not yes or no. You know, it's a spectrum. So if everyone's wearing a face covering, it's more effective than if no one is. And if most people are, then it's, you know, less risky. Kind of like outdoors in an open space is the safest compared to all of us jammed in a small indoor room. But I think things like, we don't necessarily think about the fact about how shouting and yelling and singing can be can be a risky issue, or also airflow is something that people are thinking a lot about. Just making sure we have ventilation, making sure that we're keeping some distance, that we're, I think one of the reasons people get concerned in bars is because people start standing close and the music gets loud and they start shouting in each other's faces and they take down their masks because they're drinking, and all of a sudden it becomes an issue. And so it kind of starts hitting on every single one of those situations. So I think it's important that we understand that not everything is going to be 100% safe, and life is not 100% safe. And it's just that we mitigate the risks that we can, take the risks that are acceptable to us, and then move forward and hopefully have a fun and healthy time. So Jessica, do we have other slides? I think we just have some links. So this is CDC guidelines. Honestly, if you do cdc.gov/coronavirus, that they have a whole page on community with things for large gatherings. If you are at all interested in the most updated executive orders, they can be, you can find all of that at michigan.gov/coronavirus. They've got all kinds of little tabs, different tabs, but one of them does say executive orders up near the top, as well as more data and more different things than you ever wanted to know. But that's a great place to find what's currently happening in the state right now. So that's like really the information I had right now, and I'd love to have some time for Q&A, and I'd also love to hear if people actually have some things that they're going to do in person events, whether it's for your chapter or for your work or for your family coming up. So yeah. Thank you for listening to me to talk about work for a while.
Jocelyn, is your hand raised?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jocelyn. Yeah, I didn't.
Oh, that was a clap. I couldn't tell if it was a hand raise or a clap. So,
but I did have a question. So, what are your thoughts about outdoors, far away? People aren't walking around and everyone's stationary. I mean, is that an okay time for, not having masks?
I will say, if you're 6-10 feet apart, and I mean, if you're not a chorus, if you were having a chorale, I would,
right.
I would say that. But yeah, honestly, I had a scenario like that for work today. We were at a meeting at a camp, and it was with a bunch of public health government officials, and we're like, okay, we've been walking around for a really long time, and now we're sitting in this huge pavilion, and there's 10 of us in a huge pavilion, and most of us are just going to stay here. Do we all agree we can take these down? Yes, we can. And so when we were all stationary, we weren't moving around, one person at a time was talking. It was in that case. So yeah, I think, but if people start screaming, yelling, like I said, you're at a concert, it's probably a chance that you would want to be filtering. But that's just my opinion,
Right.
Anybody else? Kimmy, for where to get individual condiments, in Muskegon, I don't know if you Gordon Foods. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure there's one on your side of the state. Someplace like Gordon Food Service. Oddly enough, that's a place that my mother also found, she was able to find nitrile gloves that she, they're not medical ones, but in the beginning, when you wanted to wear gloves, or as you're doing a lot of cleaning and disinfecting and you don't want to ruin your hands, they happen to have a whole lot of gloves there. So it's good for multiple things. No problem. So LIV's having a barbecue. Sounds good.
Jamie, I'll take just a second to bring up, so we're having our board social this weekend, and it is outside, lots of space. We can all, space ourselves way apart and make decisions for ourselves if we want a mask or not want a mask. But additionally, we're going to have, I've seen it come up a bunch of different times of churches and other social organizations and stuff using beads with 3 different colors to kind of like quickly be able to tell, is someone comfortable being hugged, being seen? Do they want to completely keep their 6 foot, like, you have to talk to me 6 feet away, or can we stand next to each other, just don't touch me kind of thing? And it's just 3 different colors, and I can throw that, I'll see if I can find the graphic real quick, but it's just 3 different colors. They're little beaded necklaces. Some people have been doing little colored bracelets, but it's a really good visual when you're around other people that you haven't seen in so long and you want to talk to them, but not everyone has the same comfort level. And it's kind of awkward to ask every single person, can I touch you? Can I hug you? You can just have a quick visual of where their comfort level is.
It's a good idea. And Shannon said, if you're outdoors and can maintain social distance, there's limited benefit to masking. And that's exactly it. When I was out today, at first we were all kind of walking around in a tumble, et cetera. People kept their masks on. And then when we stopped and we're sitting far away, we're all sitting in very far away from each other. Everyone took their masks off. So. So yeah, with condiments, I'm just thinking about how we've had a lot of people having issues with condiments with restaurants with like big pump bottles and people touching where the stuff is. But yeah, depending on the size of things. Like if you're only going to use a small amount, I wouldn't buy a big huge box of whatever you're going to use. You may end up buying like 2,000 ketchup packets for an event with 50 people, which would probably not be super cost effective. So that's also where you're looking at the benefit in the way of how you make sure you have people wiping things down, sanitizing their hands before they grab things that might be touched by other people. So it's a lot of weird little logistical things, but has anyone investigated our legal responsibility to do screening for event attendance as other events are required to do? Sounds like a great legal question. Was Sarah on?
I have not even actually thought about that. Because I know, like, when you go into a store and post a sign, or they always post signs saying don't enter if you haven't felt good in the last 24 hours. I think of those signs and say, okay, I would abide by it. And if I didn't feel good, I'd walk away if I saw that sign. But I'm not sure that we had ever thought about like legal responsibility. I know that a lot of the chapters that I've seen start events, doing them in person, have been in open parks or pavilions. So they've just gotten a permit from the city. And Kimmy, I know in Livonia had shared a letter about what we need to do or what we should be aware of for the city of Livonia from the Parks and Rec, I believe. Was that right, Kimmy? She was on.
She said she was having trouble unmuting.
Oh, I must have missed that comment.
She says yes.
But, yeah. So I know that they shared that with us and posted it in the event, so we were aware of what they expected us to do. But as far as legal, that would be a little bit more of a Corey question. If your chapter doesn't have a legal counsel, because he is our state legal counsel.
But I do think that's one of the reasons why it's like a good idea to put we ask you not to come if you are sick. So we may not take everyone's temperature when they come in, but we have at least asked them to not come. So I will think about how our the city of Muskegon has canceled all reservations for park pavilions and things like that. Like people are still allowed to use them first come first serve, like you are a picnic table, but it's basically just that it's a public picnic table, and so your family reunion, your whatever, and so they're kind of getting out of that altogether. So yeah, it seems like what precautions are we taking as a business? They've really been looking at them like as workplaces. So I wonder how they view it, because most of what we do is events. So, yeah, I feel like they've treated events and workplaces separately, but it's worth looking into. But this is another good reason for doing things outdoors.
That was actually a good idea too. Lona had mentioned in the comment section that possibly maybe like one dedicated person doing like the little plastic condiment cups,
Mm-hmm.
and that people can take a cup of the ketchup or the mustard or whatever, and that would help with cost effectiveness too, because you'd only have to buy the little ramekins, because I know a lot of the restaurants I've seen, that's what they've been putting on your plate. So they don't have the salt and pepper shakers and the ketchup and mustard or mayonnaise, whatever you want, on the actual table. They've been bringing them in little plastic containers. That's actually a good idea too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That again, not having it being a rotating assignment. It's like just Alona's job. That's her thing all night, and she's responsible for washing and sanitizing her hands throughout the evening and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good idea. So, yeah, there's a lot of considerations. Angela, did you have something?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Waivers, because there are liability if it's a public, and liability really doesn't cover pandemic issues that we found. But the other thing would be planning for future events, and it's very unknown right now what's going to be like around the holidays. But I know that there's a lot of chapters that do things like a children's shopping tour or a Christmas event and stuff. And just, I guess, having plan A and plan B, maybe talking about that a little bit, because I think that's important for our chapters to start planning ahead in July for December as much as possible, because there's going to be a lot more to it.
Yeah, I agree. Even if adopt a family or children's shopping tour takes place, it will look different. And is somebody going to want their kid that me to take their child, shopping standing next to me? And I don't know. I mean, so how can those things happen in a lower touch way? It's a very
and maybe looking at the history of your event too, because I know we have recently researched in Redford, and Santa used to go deliver to the houses the gifts. So, some of the history of the projects in the chapter might bring something as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we've been talking, and I think we're actually been talking about that as training, as far as like project reinvention, ones that have changed substantially, ones that are looking to change, whether you wanted them to or not, and kind of like what's next, whether you had to scale down or scale up, or and this is the program.
And the liability around it too. I mean, it's pretty big. Like, that's a pretty big conversation to think about, I think.
And I think that's why people have hesitated to jump into doing anything other than relatively closed, grouped social things in a large area, is because, do we want to be out in the public with, and it's like, this is put on by the, JCI Greater Muskegon, and we're inviting you all into this thing. And so.
Right.
Exactly. And I've seen, some different events and things around, and they've not been formal events, informal events. The formal events that have taken place in my community, luckily, have not had cases linked to them, but they've been done in like, I'm thinking the football field socially distant graduations, which I'm sure have happened in other communities too, where eventually in July they got 100 total people on the football, all the kids, and then they each got to bring 2 parents or something. But those have been executed incredibly specifically and well planned to avoid a whole lot of things. But it's the pop-up casual, all of a sudden there's 100 kids at the beach, at the park, in this small little area that's being linked to stuff. And I'm just sitting here going, I want to make sure that me personally don't find myself in that situation, but also that we put ourselves, give ourselves the tools to make sure that if we're doing something, we're putting something on in the order of a very well executed event that, and not a, holy cow, we have 100 people in a tiny little space that are all drinking and playing in the water. Like, it's, you know, it's, you know, I'm not saying that happened over 4th of July in my county at all. It just absolutely did not happen.
So besides Livonia, Redford is doing their picnic, I think, in August, right?
Yes, we have our JC week. So
How are you guys doing the food prep? Do you guys know? Are you guys still working through that, or people bring?
I don't know the specifics. That stuff just launched out. I don't know if you're talking about which one you're doing, but they just launched it yesterday, so there's more details to come with everything.
Well, I can speak on that.
There you go, Gabe.
I was trying to get in there.
I was like, please have someone else on here that might know.
We're following the guidelines for food preparation that are pretty commonly available. We're only going to have 2 people who are going to have any contact with the food. Individually wrapped, we're doing tacos, so easy to individually wrap tacos and hand them out. Masks, gloves, constant hand washing from the people preparing the food, and then a really safe distance between where any food is and anybody but the 2 people who are preparing the food. And both those people will do temperature checks. Obviously, neither of us will come if we're sick, and we'll be fully clean before we start cooking.
That's good information. And then I know, Jocelyn, was it Rochester that was starting to hold GMMs in person and is held back on that now? Or was that not Rochester?
We
Rochester.
haven't yet.
Okay. I thought I saw at one point it was going to be in a park or something.
That was the plan, but then the cases started rising again, so we decided to just hold it virtually.
Okay.
So Westland held a member re-engagement barbecue where everybody brought their own stuff, but then we did grill hot dogs beginning of July, and then Westland had their GMM as a hybrid, so we had it outside, but it was also on Zoom for July. So Westland has started that hybrid, and I know Redford also did a hybrid on Monday. So
okay.
So how's the engagement on that? Or even with it being a hybrid, are people logging on still?
Yeah, I would say we probably had as many people in person as we did online for the Westland one. Redford, I think, had a total of, I want to say there were 6 people online at Redford's, and we had 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 in person, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's a good idea moving forward. I would love to see that as like continued option to be able to engage things, whether it's because of COVID or not. I just think there's a lot of things that can continue to be opened up to people. I just think of even work, there's so many things I could do if I didn't have to, drive a half hour, an hour, or, there's things I could participate in that we've seen you don't need to be in person, and sometimes they're even more effective when we're not all sitting in the room. And so I think this is something we may want to continue to offer.
What might have helped the Westland virtual attendance is that Westland, actually for the past 2 years, has been doing all of their in-person meetings with a Facebook Live version. So we've had members that have already been accustomed to, if you can't make it to the GMM, connecting virtually. And so I think that also is helping with our virtual attendance in Westland.
Okay. It's just already normed there. Nice.
Are there any other members from chapters that have held or are holding in-person events now? Like, what are they doing?
South Kent had a GMM in person was it 2 months ago? 2 months ago, and the attendance was good. We had just as many people in attendance on Facebook Live, and then the board decided to go back to virtual meetings because the numbers were rising. But there's been no other events held in person besides the GMM.
Where was that held at? Was it at a park or?
Yeah, it was held in the pavilion outside in a park.
Okay.
And mask, gloves, and sanitizer were all supplied. So members, if they didn't have those items, they were available to use.
Ionia has held their GMM for the last 2 months together and in person.
Was that at a park also, or somebody's house, or?
Both times were at restaurants.
Restaurants, okay. All right, were your numbers similar to like pre-pandemic, or were they like different?
We are a much smaller chapter, but they're exactly the same.
Okay. I was just wondering if engagement or people were worried or scared.
No, surprisingly, same numbers in attendance for both GMMs. And since we started those in person, it has actually increased the communication on our group members only on Facebook as well. It's re-engaging people back into the JCs for our chapter.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. These are the kind of things I want to hear. Like, what are people doing and how is it affecting?
Yeah, it's been a wonderful turnaround. At our last GMM, which was just last week, we had a great discussion in regards to fundraising across the board because, you know, unfortunately, Ionia Free Fair is no longer for 2020, and that's where we make most of our money. So we have to think outside of the box, which we haven't had to do in a few years, and we may be putting on a softball tournament in the fall. Should we be able to do that, which is encompassing keeping things outdoors, but still being able to get a good amount of people and funds through the door. Just to circle back real quick, in regards to the legalities, and you know, this is just me as being, I never like recreating the wheel. I just like to make the wheel shiny. A great company that we all are very familiar with, Disney World in Orlando, Florida. They are very top heavy with attorneys throughout their corporate organization. So they have definitely crossed their T's and dotted their I's with the reopening that occurred at the beginning of the month. And a lot of them, their stance is that as long as it is posted, that it basically gives the liability off of them onto the individual. Just food for thought.
So the reason I asked the question was because in Livonia's document that was shared, it actually says that the person or organization renting the pavilion is responsible for monitoring participants for COVID-19 symptoms. And if you don't have a plan on how you're going to do that, how are you going to do that?
So in organizations, liability is generally based upon negligence. So it's a sliding scale really against the individual that will be filing the lawsuit and the organization itself. So all the precautions you're taking with notices, with individually wrapped food, with different people preparing things, what you're doing is you're establishing that you're not negligent. So if somebody was to file a lawsuit against Livonia JCs based upon their barbecue, they would have to prove that the organization was negligent on the way they acted in order to recover. Now, the other issue that comes in is whether or not our liability insurance would even kick in, because I'm pretty sure it has a pandemic exclusion. And that might be something to talk to our insurance person on whether or not that could be fixed, but my guess would be is no insurance company in their right mind would give that right now. So that's where waivers could come in, where you could have individuals sign waivers to give up that negligence claim. But keep in mind that they would still have the claim for gross negligence. That's something you can't waive. And intentional acts, that's something you can't waive. So a member comes, they know they have COVID, but they want to give it to as many people as possible. That's something that doesn't matter what you do, you can never get rid of that liability. That would definitely fall into the gross negligence category. So the more you can do, the better. But to completely eliminate liability in these uncertain times is completely impossible.
So would you suggest, like in the case of using Livonia's barbecue, if I'm going to recruit volunteers to serve food or to interact with the public, would it be reasonable to expect me to do like infrared temperature monitoring or screening, like having specific screening questions? Because asking somebody about a COVID symptom is
the more things you do like that, the better. Obviously, what you pointed out, the waiver that Livonia, or the license that Livonia is making you adhere to, obviously, is they're trying to shift their liability. Also, you'll see in most of those contracts, there's an indemnification provision. I know a couple of years ago, we got our insurance agent to give us an indemnification rider. So now when we sign those, we're covered for the indemnification, but there would still be the exclusion for the pandemic if the lawsuit was to come in that way, shape, or form.
Sure. So this is the document that.
Also keeping in mind that I don't think I've seen any lawsuits on that yet. I know the CARES Act gave a lot of exclusions for medical care facilities and healthcare providers to limit their liability. But I mean, I don't think there was anything done to limit the liability of nonprofits or other businesses. It just kind of falls back on the negligence standard.
There you go, Peter in with all kinds of knowledge.
The scariest part is, especially for our age demographic, there are a lot of asymptomatic carriers as well. So it's, even if we ask the questions and take the temperatures, there's still a reasonable probability that somebody may come to an event an asymptomatic carrier, meaning they're not having any expression of the disease, even though they're carrying it and can transmit it to others. So going that extra mile and asking those questions, and even if you can get an infrared thermometer or something like that to take temperatures, just to do those extra steps to show that you're taking as many precautions as possible, from my perspective, would be advisable, even beyond legal liability, but just to do the right thing.
Yeah. Peter says yes.
What other organizations are kind of putting together and putting out there. So like, for example, the Kansas City Barbecue Society, which is the kind of organizing body that oversees the Westland barbecue competition. There's a document that we have to have every participant, every competitor, every volunteer, every judge read and sign, that talks about all of the things that they have to be doing. Face masks, gloving, changing gloves, sanitizing, all of this stuff that we have to have them sign before they can participate. And so, I mean, it's a rather long document because it covers basically every possible thing to do with barbecue. But looking at what some of those other kind of organizations that have already had to do stuff like this, looking at what they have and seeing if we can, as someone said, polish the wheel, not recreate the wheel.
Yeah, and I know even when my kids went to the dentist, Peter was sent a link that survey had to be filled out, a pre-screening for them to even go in on Monday morning. And apparently the second they walked in, all the kids got temperature checked too. And if you didn't complete the survey, you were not being seen and sent away. So that's interesting too, that the dentist is doing that also in the medical context.
I have to get temperature checked at my son's daycare, so when I go to drop him off and pick him up, so just as the person coming in the building.
Walking into work, I have to sanitize my hands, be temperature screened, sanitize my hands, apply a mask, be temperature screened, ask really personal, embarrassing questions about my bowel habits, and then I'm allowed to go to work.
Oh. Yeah.
Are you coughing? Are you sneezing? Do you have diarrhea? Do you have a sore throat? Have you been around anybody with known COVID-19 recently or known exposure? All of those questions we get asked walking in every morning, and our visitors do too, which for some of them is kind of uncomfortable. Me, I don't care. I'll tell you all about my business, but not everybody wants to share those things. So it's been a surprise to a lot of family members, but if you want to come see your loved one in the hospital, you have to answer the questions and get your temperature taken.
Yeah, I think, people more and more are understanding that some of the stuff, it's just the price of admission. And, I went to a local, it was the tiki bar at my parents' boat club the other day, and they had just recently started with they had been requesting masks, but it's for the outdoor service. They didn't have to obviously wear them at the table, but to go up to the counter service, they had to wear them, and they had a sign that says, "Please do not complain about this. We are not going to risk our life or any fines for it." And I asked somebody if they were having trouble, and they said, "Oh, people were grumbling about it." But I'm like, they can drink at home if they want. Like, you don't have to participate. These things are optional. If you don't want to wear a mask when you're sitting inside in a meeting, or if you don't want to do whatever we're doing, you don't have to be here. We're not forcing you to be here. These are the things we're doing because we want to maintain the health of our members, our guests, maintain our reputation as an organization. We don't want to be the one that's called out and says, "Oh, a meeting of the greatest young professionals organization just had an outbreak," and nobody was paying attention to what they were doing. Like, we're not going to do that.
I think the other thing that's kind of changed, I would say probably over the past 3 to 4 weeks, is people have come to the realization that this is not going away anytime soon. And so people are starting, for the first couple months of it, we had everybody, all the naysayers and whatever. And I think it's now gotten to the point where even if you don't agree with the mask policy, you realize that the mask policies aren't going away. And so you have two choices. Either you obey or go sit in your house.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
I wonder if it would be helpful even in the event page to just do a general blanket what we think are safe survey questions or screening questions, whether it would be for the members that are coming to prepare food, as Shannon was mentioning, if they're coming into contact with food, and Gabe was mentioning what they were thinking of doing or planning on doing before they touch it. But just putting some general things together, not saying this is what you have to do, but just a recommendation. Would that help just to have that out there?
You mean like a link to a screening questionnaire?
Yeah, either a link or something put together that just has basic questions there for people to use as a template, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
To Peter's point, even if a lawsuit wouldn't have the ability to stand up in court, I don't think anybody wants to be that organization or that business like the bar in Lansing that has all these COVID cases tied to it, right? So we don't want the negative publicity to begin with. And I think we would deter people from even filing an action or showing up to an event sick if they know that we're going to be doing the things that we talked about in the training. And with with that, like he said, to like limit liability, but also to let the community know that we're taking it seriously. Because I think as young leaders and a young leadership organization, if we don't do those things, then other organizations may not take it as seriously either. And I think it's good as leaders to be an example for the other events and organizations in the community that might be thinking about doing things. We want to be on the right side of this part of history as much as other parts of history that we've talked about over the last 30 days, 40 days.
Right?
Young people in general. So if we're the young person's organization doing this, maybe it can encourage some other young people to follow the guidelines.
And show them what it looks like. Because
Yep.
it may seem like if you tell people they have to do a health screening and all this other stuff, it may sound very intimidating. But if they can see that it's 3 check boxes and an infrared thermometer, it makes it a lot less scary. And it shows them that it's possible to do those things. And it also, like for fundraising things, I know that there are organizations still planning on their haunted house for the fall. For a haunted house, I definitely think that screening people as they come in would not only protect us as an organization to show that we're doing the right things, but it would also encourage patrons to patronize your event because they know that we're checking for those things and it's not something we're taking lightly.
I think it also, given the demographic who attends a haunted house, it normalizes and encourages that kind of stuff because they want to come to a haunted house whether they think that's bunk or not. And so it's just like, well, this is just a thing that we do. So it's normalizing the good behavior. So, but I look and I'm a member of Rotary, and while there's some people our age, there's a lot of people who are like my dad's age or my grandma's age, and we are in no way, shape, or form anywhere close to starting meetings in public again. You know, I don't know when I'm gonna see those folks again. Although I will say 100 people get on Zoom every single week for lunch for my Rotary Club, which is absolutely insane. Somewhere anywhere between like 75 and 100 people. So yeah, so looks like, yeah, haunted houses are the next month or so is going to be a hit or miss or crucial time for making those decisions. So.
And as we move into haunted house season and Thanksgiving and Christmas, when we do a lot of our community activities, we're also going to be battling flu. Flu season is roughly September to March. So some people may be symptomatic and it may not be COVID. And some people will think, well, it's not COVID, it's just the flu, or it's not COVID, it's just a cold because it's the weather change and da-da-da-da. So I think we're going to have to be very protective of ourselves at that time.
And so that's why that bullet said, do not come if you're ill of any kind. That means do not come if you have a cold, do not come if you have the flu, do not come if you have a gastrointestinal upset that we don't want to have, that Shannon has to talk about. So yeah. Also, I am very hopeful that maybe if people are washing their hands more and wearing masks and staying away from other people, maybe our flu season won't be ridiculously, horribly terrible.
Hopefully.
We have to have some, that's my optimism coming out. So, all right, anything else? You can connect with any of us. Obviously, Shannon has a wealth of medical knowledge that we like to exploit at every single opportunity. But you can always reach any of our programming team, and we're so happy to spend time with you guys tonight.
It was good seeing everybody.
Yeah, see y'all soon.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Follow up if you have any questions.
Thanks so much for sharing this great information.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Wish you weekend.
Barry, aren't you due like any day now?
I can't turn it on.
I have 3.5 weeks. So I'll be 37 weeks on Monday.
Are you doing okay?
I'm hanging in there.
Nice and hot for you.
Yes.
Summer to be pregnant.
Right?
Well, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Yeah, stay in your
4 kids. They'll keep me healthy.
You have a good immune system because of those kids.
Maybe. They haven't been out with other kids, so they haven't brought stuff home. So that'll be the issue when they actually get out to be with other kids, that then they'll bring it home to me and it'll spread faster. So that's not really going to be fun.
We've never gone this long. My son just finally got an ear infection, but we went the whole winter
Oh, wow.
with nothing. I mean, he had ear infections before, but we've been the whole year. But this is like the first time we saw a doctor. This whole time. He spent 9 weeks not in daycare. And we didn't get colds in the spring, and we didn't get the flu.
Well, that was my first thought. I said, you take these kids out of school and you shut them down and they can't see their friends. And then you say, we're going to do in-person school in the fall. And you're going to put them all in the place together. So they've now don't have a built up immune system that they've been working on for 2 years. And so now you're going to throw them all together and it's going to break out. Everything's going to break out.
Yeah, they'll survive.